All right, Rabbi, you're going live. There's a reason I put this. Stop. Stop. Turn off your mic.
I guess almost in there.
Thank you.
But you look just like you looked about 20 years ago. Wow.
We're streaming.
30 years.
And there's people.
I'd say 30.
Oh.
Very good. I'm able to appreciate both my parents and services for decades. Well, 27 years.
It's so good to see you. You look wonderful. It's so nice to not see you on Facebook.
Right. It's nice to see you on Facebook.
Yeah.
Thank you. And you're going to sing tonight?
Yes. All right. They have drafted.
Anyone
I
on the
have been
Congress
drafted.
of
Okay.
We'll see how it goes. Yeah.
If you're on the synagogue's Wi-Fi, please get off. Or I can pick you up.
So a friend of mine said,
Huh? Yeah, your phone is probably connected. Yeah.
No.
Eric.
He was a star.
Really?
Yeah.
Maybe. I know he's really good at it.
Yeah.
He said it was like
Well, we had a great time putting it together. You know, had many rehearsals. It was long
Did the
away.
congregation turn out? Did they know about it? Well, I was out.
We don't need a month-long fast. We don't need a month-long fast. Fine.
You know what happens when you got the phone? Going to place. Okay.
You're unmuted. You're ready.
Okay. But there's something here I'm clicking.
Yeah, I forgot.
I'm clicking, got it. Okay. Okay. All right. Forgive me for being an ignorant.
So you're not an ignorant, you're the rabbi.
I only saw it on the screen.
That's right. So you don't know. This is my daughter Sophie. I'm not breathing well in this mask, but I'm in the front, so I'm breathing.
All right. So,
I've had it all my day.
all right. And you've done this before with us, right? So we got violins and
I think that's what's happening.
and,
Nice seeing you in person, Rabbi. There's wonderful things about you.
I can send you some of the opposites. If you like.
No, I won't listen to you. Don't make me read every word these days.
Okay, 5 minutes. We
There's
start
30
5 minutes.
people.
What's that?
30 people are waiting for you.
All right. Are we streaming? Are we on?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, and people are still coming in.
They didn't make an announcement.
I'm just about to do that. I hear the
Folks,
end.
Folks, I'm gonna run out and get a sandwich. But as soon as I get back, we're gonna get started. So if you can find yourself a seat, make yourself to home. And listen to the sounds of nature. We're joined, I'm told, by 30 people who are watching the live stream. So looks like we have a menu. Do you have a copy of the reading? Right, it would be helpful for you to have that. Because some of these are I mean, tonight is not so complicated. I'll make sure Mary has a copy for you.
The speakers over there. Yeah, that's why a lot of people sit over there. The sound is so clear.
I had a chair there, but I thought I'd see better. I think sitting at first. I think I'll take the glasses and mix them. What age is it back then?
Started in school. No longer an option in Los Angeles.
Okay. So I don't know if you knew my son's a paramedic, but he went to a conservatory in Texas. So he had an accident. But then he broke his skin. So he's a soldier. He's into there.
That's so nice. Probably making lots more money as a software. Everyone is going.
Absolutely. And I didn't know. But there's only 2 to 5 paramedics in this industry.
Oh, yeah.
You know, with
That's a lot.
violin, you may have a shot.
Yeah. There's 16 of us in each section, so 30.
Right, right. There's
No.
no
Wind players. Very, very. Okay.
way. And he started, they put him in the flatter band at first, which was secular, and he was too shy. He was too young. He was young, you know, and it was, anyway. Started getting really nervous.
Some people don't understand. It's a problem.
Oh, that's true. I'm okay with that.
There's a lot of music in his family.
Well, good evening, everybody. Good evening and Shana Tova to our Kol Nidre service out in the open with sounds of nature and traffic, but the sounds of nature for sure. And very, very nice night. You know, the feedback from Rosh Hashanah, as far as the service outside, was very positive. And I think it lends itself. And Yom Kippur, there's something about Yom Kippur. This is not my sermon for the evening, so I'm not going to go on for very long. But as I get through the day on Erev Yom Kippur, every Yom Kippur, whether I'm leading a service or not, and we start to gather, there's something innate, there's something intuitive, there's something in the Jewish DNA that tells us that this is a special day. This is the day, Shabbat, Shabbatoni, Shabbat, Shabbatot, this the Sabbath of Sabbaths. And the real holiness of this occasion really falls upon us. It falls upon us like a blanket. And it's very nice that you're here. It's very nice to have Andy back and Belle Ann and Julie here to play on the violin as we get to the Kol Nidre in a few moments. But first, it's my privilege and honor to call on Sherry to come forward and light the candles. We begin our service on page 9, in the middle of the page.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu haldik ner shel hakippurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shechechianu v'kiyamanu v'hegianu.
Azman hazeh. Amen. We continue on page 14. Jen, rather, beg your pardon.
God, my creator and guide, as I seek purity of soul on this holiest of days, I contemplate your gifts of love and forgiveness. I know that perfect righteousness is beyond. Oh, God, sorry, we're on the wrong page.
That was a good one, though.
Thank you. I practiced a lot. Yom Kippur, the Jewish people's festival of the soul, and Kol Nidre, its sacred portal, a night of deep emotions. A night, as the psalmist wrote, to rejoice with trembling. We rejoice at the sound of Kol Nidre, rhythmic words of release from vows, oaths, and promises to God we fail to keep. We tremble at the melody. Music of spiritual amazement. It fills us with awe as we stand before God and Torah. We rejoice that we stand together, strengthened by community in this hour of shared weakness and humility. We tremble, for tonight we confess our flaws, admit our imperfection, and acknowledge a power far beyond our understanding. We rejoice that we commit ourselves to great endeavors because we feel so deeply and think so nobly. We tremble, for we find that our ideals are far greater than our ability. Our promises surpass our might. We rejoice in the freedom that is Kol Nidre's true gift. The freedom to begin a new year without fear of failure, to aspire to be God's image in the world. We tremble because we are mortal. We rejoice in our gratitude for life. We rejoice with trembling and enter Kol Nidre to face our humanity.
We continue on page 16.
Ozaru ala tzadik, Yishwele simcha. Ozaru ala tzadik, Yishwele simcha. Ozaru ala tzadik, Yishwele simcha. Or zahu ala tzadik, ולישראל שמחה. בשיבה של מעלה ובשיבה של מטה, על דעת המקום, על דעת הקהל, אנו מתירים להתפלל עם העבריינים. With the ruling from the court above, with the ruling from the court below, with approval from the Holy One, with approval from the congregation, we declare it permissible to pray with the transgressor.
We turn to page 18, and I call upon our 3 Torah holders to please come forward. I ask you all please to rise.
כל הנדרי ועשרי וחרמי וקונמי וכינויי וכינוסי ושבוע יום כיפורים זה עד יום כיפורים הבא עלינו לטובה ולהון יחרט נבהון יהון שרן שביתין ותהילין ומבוטלין לשירים ולקיימים נדרן Sarana na esare ushevuatana la Hashevu
כל נדחה ועשרה וחרמה וקונמה וכינויה וכינוסי ושבועות Dinarna udistabana udacharimna vidasarna al nahar מתנה מיום כיפורים זה עד יום כיפורים הבא. עלינו לטובה איחרתנה בהון. יהון שרן שביתין בטלים ומבוטלים לשירים ולקיימים. נדרנה נדרה ואסרנה לאסרה ושבועתנה לשבועות.
Please be seated. Now we continue on page 20.
ונסלח לכל עדת בני ישראל ולגר הגר בתוכם, כי לכל העם בשגגה. סלח נא לעוון העם הזה כגודל חסדך, וכאשר נשאת לעם הזה ממצרים ועד הנה. ויאמר אדוני סלחתי כדברך, ויאמר אדוני סלחתי כדברך, ויאמר אדוני סלחתי כדברך, סלחתי כדברך.
Page 22. Bless the eternal, the blessed one. Blessed is the eternal, the blessed one, now and forever. Please rise.
Yadadai, 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 yadadai,
Blessed are you, Adonai. Your great name fills the universe with majestic might. Your word creates twilight and dusk, as your wisdom opens the gates of might. Your discernment separates the changing seasons
and causes the passage of time. The stars are arrayed across the sky, reveal your design. You roll out the cycle of darkness and light, shaping day and night. You sweep away day and carry the world into nightfall, setting day apart from nighttime. You are God of all we can perceive, and all that is beyond our perception.
Living eternal God, be our sovereign to the end of time.
El Chai v'kayam, tamid yimlo, aleinu le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai, Amari, Aravim.
Together on 26. Love beyond all space and time.
Your love enfolds your people, Israel. We receive it in your teaching, your gift of Torah, sacred obligations, discipline, and law. So let us speak these teachings, so we lie down and rise up, and find joy forever in your Torah and mitzvot. They are the very essence of our life, ours to ponder and study on our days. May we never lose or be unworthy of your love.
For you are blessed, the one who loves your people, Yisrael.
כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ובהם נגע יומם ולילה, ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל.
Jen?
We pause in reverence before the gift of self. The vessel shatters, the divine spark shines through, and our solitary self becomes a link in Israel's golden chain. For what we are by sharing. As we share, we move toward the light. We pause in reverence before the mystery of her presence, the near and far reality of God. Not union, but communion is our aim. And we approach the mystery with deeds. Words lead us to the edge of action, but it is deeds that bring us closer to the God of light. We pause in terror before the human deed, the cloud of annihilation, the concentrations for death, the cruelly casual way of each to each. But in the stillness of this hour, we find our way from darkness into light. May we find our life so precious that we cannot but share it with the other, that light may shine brighter than 1,000 suns with the presence among us of the God of light.
Hear, O Israel, the eternal our God, the eternal is one. Blessed is God's glorious majesty forever and ever. Page 28.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam va'ed. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשופטך ובקומך ושבתם לאות על ידיך והיו תותפות בעיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תשתבו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם אלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם. Amen.
We continue on page 37. We need you again, Jen.
Something will have gone out of us as a people if we ever let the remaining wilderness be destroyed. If we permit the last virgin forests to be turned into comic books and plastic cigarette cases. If we drive the few remaining members of the wild species into zoos or to extinction. If we pollute the last clear air and dirty the last clean streams and push our paved roads through the last of the silence, so that never again will Americans be free in their own country from the noise, the exhausts, the stinks of human and automotive waste, and so that never again can we have the chance to see ourselves single, separate, vertical and individual in the world, part of the environment of trees and rocks and soil, brother to the other animals, part of the natural world and competent to belong in it. Without any remaining wilderness, we are committed wholly, without chance for even momentary reflection and rest, to a headlong drive into our technological termite life, the brave new world of a completely man-controlled environment. We need wilderness preserved, as much of it as is still left, and as many kinds, because it was the challenge against which our character as a people was formed. The reminder and the reassurance that it is still there is good for our spiritual health, even if we never once in 10 years set foot in it. It is good for us when we are young, because of the incomparable sanity it can bring briefly, as vacation and rest into our insane lives. It is important to us when we are old simply because it is there. Important, that is, simply as an idea.
We continue on page 39.
Our sages taught it is proper to mention the exodus from Egypt in our morning prayers and also at night. We celebrate the going out from Egypt in the morning light, full of confidence and vigor as we enter the new day. But in the evening, weary from the day's exertions, cast down and fearful at the coming of the night. What can the exodus teach us then? Our nighttime prayer brings hope and trust in the future. As God did not abandon our people long ago, through the long, dark night of exile, so the Holy One will be with us in time to come. To stand by the one you love, that is the true essence of faithfulness, the meaning of emunah. So it is written in the Psalms, to proclaim your kindness in the morning and your faithfulness in the nights. Sing with joy in the mornings of your life, when light surrounds you and the world seems beautiful and good. And in the evenings of your life, when you dwell in sorrow and the world seems dark, do not despair.
We are Israel, a people of God, the giver of life, who would not let our feet give way, the maker of miracles for us against Pharaoh, of signs and portents in the land of Egypt, the one who brought our people Israel from its midst to enduring freedom. Bara'u banav gvurato, shibchu v'hodu lishmo, malchuto baratzon kiblu aleihem, Moshe u'Miriam u'bnei Yisrael lecha anu shira, V'simcha rabba v'yamaru chulam, page 40.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נורא תהילות אוסף מלכותך ראו בניך בוקי הים לפני משה ומרים זה אלי ענו ואמרו אדוני לא לעולם ועד ונאמר יפדה אדוני את יעקב וגלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
Page 42. Bless our sleep with peace, Adonai, together, and awaken us to life when we rise. With power sublime, spread over us your shelter of shalom,
and through your wisdom restore us, make us whole. Let your name proclaim your presence in our lives. Be our shield, make us stronger than the enemies we face. Illness and war, famine and sorrow, and stronger than the enemies in our hearts, wickedness and sin. Carry us to safety as on wings, for you are the monarch of grace, the sovereign of compassion. You are the one who cares for us and sets us free. Watch over us, we who go forth to life. Watch over us, that we may come home in peace, now and till the end of time. Baruch atah Adonai Hapores Sukat Shalom Aleinu Ve'al kol amo Yisrael Ve'al Yerushalayim.
That all, I beg your pardon, we're on page 45. For on this day of atonement shall be made for you. For on this day atonement shall be made for you to purify you from all your wrongs, and pure you shall be in the presence of Adonai.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah V'alma divrei chilutei V'yamlich malchutei B'chayechom u'vyomechom u'b'chayei dachol beit Yisrael B'gala ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם ולעלמיה יתברך יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה ולעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה ואמירן בנעמה ואמרו אמן.
Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. We're on page 48. Please rise.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu ve'imotenu Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov. Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah. האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומר חסדים טובים, מגנה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. זוכרנו לחיים, מלך חפץ בחיים, וחופנו בספר החיים, למענך אלוהים חיים, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה, רב להושיע. מוריד הטל, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך ועל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישוע. מי כמוך אב הרחמים, זוכר יצוריו לחיים ורחמים, ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני, לחיי הכל.
Please be seated. We continue, I'm going to ask you to continue on page 51.
Fall, falling, fallen. That's the way the season changes its tense in the long-haired maples that dot the road. The veiny hand-shaped leaves reddened on their branches in a fiery competition with the final remaining cardinals, and then begin to sidle and float through the air, at last settling into the colorful layers, carpeting the ground. At twilight, the light too is layered in the trees in a season of odd, dusky congruences, a scarlet tanager or tanager, and the odor of burning leaves, a golden retriever loping down the center of a wide street, and the sun setting behind smoke-filled trees in the distance. A gap opening up in the treetops and a bruised cloud blamelessly filling the space with purples. Everything changes and moves in the split second between summer's sprawling past and winter's hard revision. One moment pulling out of the station according to schedule. Another moment arriving on the next platform. It happens almost like clockwork. The leaves drift away from their branches and gather slowly at our feet, sliding over our ankles, and the season begins moving around us, even as its colorful weather moves on or moves us, even as it pulls us into dusty twilight pockets, And every year there's a brief, startling moment when we pause in the middle of a long walk home and suddenly feel something invisible and weightless touching our shoulders, sweeping down from the air. It is the autumn wind pressing against our bodies. It is the changing light of fall falling on us.
Page 58. You and you alone, Adonai, will reign over creation upon Mount Zion, home of your presence, and in Jerusalem, a city set apart by you. As the psalmist believed, God will reign eternally, your God, Zion, for all generations. Hallelujah.
Kadosh ata ve'nora shemecha ve'ein Eloah mibaladecha kakatu vayikbach Adonai tzevaot b'mishpat v'ha'el hakadosh mikdash mitzdaka baruch atah Adonai hamelech hakadosh.
Page 62. Batiten lanu Adonai Eloheinu b'ahava et Yom HaKippurim hazeh l'nechila u'l'slicha l'chapara u'limchol bo et kol avonotenu mikra kodesh zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim. Together, in your love eternal, our God, you have given us this Yom Kippur, a day on which our wrongs are forgiven with love,
A day of sacred assembly,
a
a day to be mindful of our people's going out from Egypt. Eloheinu ve'Elohei avoteinu ve'imotenu, ya'aleh ve'yavo ve'yagia ve'yira'eh ve'yiratzeh, ve'yishama v'yipaked v'yizachem, zichronenu v'fiktonenu, v'zichron avoteinu ve'imotenu, v'zichron Yerushalayim ir kodshecha, v'zichron kol amecha beit Yisrael, lefanecha livleta letova, lechenu chesed u'rachamim, lechaim u'shalom, v'yom HaKippurim hazeh.
Page 64.
Zochrenu Adonai Eloheinu bo letova,
Amen.
ufokdeinu bo livracha,
Amen.
v'hoshienu bo lechaim,
Amen.
ובדבר ישועה ורחמים חוס תכוננו ורחם עלינו והושיענו כי אליך עינינו כי אל מלכנו ורחום אתה.
Page 72. Together. Eternal our God, your people Israel yearns for your favor. Receive their prayer with loving acceptance, and may you always desire your people's worship. Divine One, close to all who call upon you. Bring your grace and presence near to those who serve you. Pour your Spirit on us, and may your eyes see your merciful return to Zion. Baruch atah Adonai Machazir Shechinato L'Tzion. Page 74.
מודים אנחנו לך שאתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו אלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו לעולם ועד. צור חיינו מגן אישנו אתה הוא לדור ודור. נודה לך נספר תהילתך על חיינו המסורים בידיך ועל נשמותינו הפקודות לך ועל ניסיך שבכל יום עמנו ועל נפלותיך טובותיך שבכל עת ערב ובוקר וצהריים. הטוב כי לא כלו רחמך והמרחם כי לא תמוך חסדיך מעולם קיווינו לה, ועל כולם יתברך ויתרומם שמך, מלכנו תמיד לעולם ועד, ובטוב לחיים טובים, כל בני בריתך. וכל החיים יודוך סלע, ויהללו את שמך באמת, האל ישועתנו ועזרתנו סלע. ברוך אתה אדוני, הטוב שמך ולך נאה להודות.
Amen. We continue on page 78.
Shalom Rabbi Yisrael Amecha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rabbi Yisrael Amecha Tasim Leolam. כי אתה הוא מלך אדון לכל השלום, וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. בספר חיים ברכה ושלום ופרנסה טובה, ניזכר וניכתב לפניך אנחנו וכל עמך בית ישראל, לחיים טובים ושלום. ברוך אתה אדוני עושה השלום.
You are the blessed one, the eternal one, the source of peace. Let me invite you all now to take a moment or two of silence for your own thoughts, prayers, and meditations, and we'll continue on page 81. Just a moment of silence.
רצון אם נפינו ויום ליבנו לפניך. רצון אם נפינו ויום ליבנו לפניך. אדוני צורנו וגואלנו, ירדה Shalom Bilomah Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu. דרכו ישראל, דרכו יושבי תבל, ואמרו,
May the one who makes peace in the highest of places bring some of that peace down among us, among all Israel, among the whole world. And we conclude this part of the service by saying together,
Amen.
We continue now with the a part of the service that's unique to Yom Kippur, the vidui, the confession. It's on page 82. I ask you please to rise.
Eloheinu ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, תבוא לפניך תפילתנו, ואל תתעלם מתפילתנו. אנחנו עזי פנים וקשי עורף, לומר לפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, צדיקים אנחנו ולא חטאנו, אבל אנחנו חטאנו. יאי 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 אשמנו, בגדנו, גזלנו, דיברנו דופי, האבינו, והרשענו, זדנו, חמסנו, טפלנו שקר, יאי לי לי יאי 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 לי 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 יעצנו רע, כיזבנו, לחצנו, מרדנו, ניאצנו, שררנו, אהבינו, פשענו, שררנו, תשינו עורף, יאי 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 רשענו, שחטנו, תיעבנו, טעינו, תיתנו, איי 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 איי
Together. Of these wrongs we are guilty. We betray,
we steal, we scorn, we act perversely, we are cruel, we scheme, we are violent, we slander, we devise evil, we lie, we ridicule, we disobey, we abuse, we defy, we corrupt, we commit crimes, we are hostile, we are stubborn, we are immoral, we kill, we spoil, we go astray, we lead others astray.
Please be seated. We continue on page 85.
Resh Lakish said, great is repentance, where it transforms one's deliberate sins into merits. In general, we think of repentance as a way of achieving expiation in the wrongs we've done. But Resh Lakish's teaching points us in a new and surprising direction. The focus is not on changing the past, but on defining a new direction for the future. For Teshuvah, after all, is ultimately about changing ourselves, not only clearing our record of past deeds that we are now ashamed of. Through the process of Teshuvah, we evolve morally, becoming the sort of people who can no longer conceive of falling back into the old patterns of misconduct that characterized our past. But how did this transformation occur if not through the examination of that very misconduct? Transgressions can become a springboard for a tremendous moral growth if only we do the hard work of Teshuvah that enables us to learn from our mistakes. In this way, repentance enables us to turn our moral liabilities into assets. Rabbi Soloveitchik captures the spiritual dynamic of this process. The years of sin are transformed into powerful, impulsive forces which propel the sinner toward God. Sin is not to be forgotten, blotted out, or cast into the depths of the sea. On the contrary, sin has to be remembered. It is the memory of sin that releases the power within the inner depths of the soul of the penitent to do greater things than ever before. The energy of sin can be used to bring one to new heights. It would be preposterous if an accountant suggested that a debit was really a credit. But what is impossible on a financial balance sheet is eminently doable in the context of soul reckoning. Indeed, the very goal of Teshuvah is to transform the sins of the past into the roots of a new life. In a profound sense, repentance does turn our vices into virtues.
We continue on page 86. Please rise.
החטא שחטאנו לפניך בזדון ובשגגה, והחטא שחטאנו לפניך בדיבור פה. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך באימוץ הלב, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בתשפוט פה. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך וכחש ובחזר, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך ברכילות, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בבלילות, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בזלזול הורים ומורים, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בווידוי פה, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בהונאת ריח, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בחוזק יד, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך במשא ומתן, ועל כולם אלוה סליחו, סלח לנו מחלנו, סלח לנו מחלנו, כפר לנו. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בגלוי ובשדה, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בפריקת אור, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בגילוי עריות, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך במאכל ומשתה, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך ביצר הרע, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בנפש ובמרבית, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בלצון, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בנטיית גרון. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בשנאת חינם, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בטומאת שפתיים. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בלשון הרע, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בצרות עין. ועל כולם אלוהים סליחות, סלח לנו מחלנו, סלח לנו מחלנו,
For all of our failures of judgment and will, God of forgiveness, forgive us, pardon us, lead us to atonement. We continue on page 96. Please be seated.
יעלה תחנוננו מערב, ויבוא שבתנו מבוקר, ויראה רינוננו עד ערב, יעלה קולנו מערב, ויבוא צדקתנו מבוקר, ויראה פדיוננו עד ערב, יעלה עינוינו מערב, ויבוא סליחתנו מבוקר, ויראה נקתנו עד ערב, יעלה מנוסנו מערב, ויבוא למענו מבוקר, ויראה כיפורנו עד ערב.
Together on page 98. Hear our call, Adonai our God. Show us compassion. Accept our prayer with love and goodwill. We hope, Adonai, we wait for you. Surely you, Adonai, are God, who will answer.
Adonai עלינו, נקבל ברחמים וברצון את תפילתנו. חדש ימינו, חדש ימינו, חדש ימינו, שכן.
As parents show tenderness to their children, may you show mercy to those who worship you. Like the heavens that tower above the earth, your love is powerful for those who revere you. They're on page 101.
רחם אדוני יראה, יחי בו השמיים על הארץ, גבר חסדו על יראה. ירחמיו על בנים, רחם אדוני על יראה, יחי בו השמיים על הארץ, גבר חסדו על יראה.
Adonai Adonai el Rachum v'Chanun, Erech Apayim v'Rav Chesed v'Emet, Notzer Chesed la'alafim, Nosei Avon v'Fesha v'Chata'a v'Nakei. Adonai Adonai, God compassionate, gracious, endlessly patient, loving and true, showing mercy to the 1,000th generation, forgiving evil, defiance, and wrongdoing, granting pardon. We are on page 106.
Anu amecha ve'ata Eloheinu, anu banecha ve'ata avinu, ana avadecha ve'ata Adoneinu, anu kehalecha ve'ata chelkeinu, anu nachlatecha ve'ata goraleinu, anu tzonecha ve'ata roeinu, anu charmecha ve'ata notreinu, anu fulatecha ve'ata yotzreinu, anu rayatecha ve'ata doneinu, anu segulatecha ve'ata keroveinu, anu amecha ve'ata malkeinu, anu ma'amirecha ve'ata ma'amireinu.
We are your beloved and you are our lover. We are your treasure and you are the one we cherish. We are your people and you reign over us. We offer you our words and you offer us yours. So forgive us, pardon us, lead us to atonement. Page 111.
Answer us, you who answered our mother Sarah in her old age, you who answered our father Abraham on Mount Moriah, you who answered their son Yitzchak when bound upon the altar, you who answered Rebekah when she cried, why do I exist? You who answered Yaakov at Bethel, Israel shall be your name. You who answered Leah in her sadness, you who answered Rachel in her pain, you who answered Joseph in the prison house, you who answered midwives, Shiphrah and Puah at the birthing stones, you who answered Yocheved's courage on the bank of the Nile, you who answered our fathers and our mothers at the Sea of Reeds, you who answered Moses at Sinai, I bore you on eagle's wings. You who answered the daughters of Zelophehad, who stood up for their rights before Moses and God. You who answered Elijah with a still small voice in the wilderness. You who answered the righteous ones before us, men and women of integrity and compassion, answer us.
Page 112.
Avinu Malkeinu, ha'er lanu et derech chayenu. Avinu Malkeinu, chonenu v'aleinu, chazkeinu ve'ametzeinu, ivecha v'imcha tatshuvo. Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Kolenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chapanu Lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Chamol Aleinu, Ve'alol Aleinu, V'tapenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Kale Dever V'cherem, V'ra'av Me'aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Kale Kotzar Mastin Me'aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Koshvenu, B'Sefer Chaim Tovim. Avinu Malkeinu, Chadesh Aleinu, Shana Tova. Avinu Malkeinu, Malei Yadeinu, Mibirchotecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Harem Keren Meshichecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Na'al Teshivenu Rekam Milfanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Kabel B'rachamim U'B'ratzon et Tevilatenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Asa Imanu L'ma'an Shemecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Asa L'ma'ancha Im Lo L'ma'anenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Ein Lanu Melech Ela Ata. Avinu Malkeinu, B'tach She'arei Shamayim Litfilatenu, Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Kolenu, Chus v'rachem Aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu v'aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu v'aleinu, Ki ein banu masim. Asay imanu, tzedaka v'chesed. Asay imanu, tzedaka v'chesed, v'hoshienu.
Please be seated. Well, again, good evening. Shana Tova, Hatima Tova. It's nice to see those of you who I can see and those who I see little points of light off in the distance. It's nice to see you as well. It's just really a special evening, I have to say. In February of 1974, I found myself standing at the Western Wall in Jerusalem. I'd come to Israel out of vague interest in a country I'd observed just a few months before at war with Egypt and Syria in what was an existential war, which, with great loss of life, Israel won. I knew very little about the Jewish state at that time, really just an embarrassing few facts, enough to entice me there, but not with any great sense of purpose. I knew my grandmother, gone at that time for just a few years, held Israel deep in her heart. She visited Israel once, in May of 1967, on the eve of another fateful war. I would learn many years later, Israel lived in dread of annihilation. My grandmother, Lena Gelber, was the single most important influence on my Jewish identity when I was young, and her travel there as a 70-year-old woman, widowed for 6 years, made a huge impression upon me. But still, my presence in Jerusalem carried little deep meaning. Any regard for my Jewishness I might have had growing up among my assimilated family in the Philadelphia suburbs had been cast aside. I came to Israel as the kind of tourist who wanted to see the country, eat the food, soak up the atmosphere, surface stuff. As I stood staring at the wall, a black cardboard yarmulke atop my head, wondering what I should be feeling, a bearded man in a long black coat and a black hat approached me. "What are you doing in Israel?" he asked. That morning, I'd made arrangements for free room and board at a youth hostel in return for light duties so I could remain in Jerusalem for a bit, after which I'd planned to volunteer to live for a couple of months on a kibbutz in hopes of meeting a Swedish volunteer. I told him this, not the Swedish volunteer part. "How would you like to study in a school?" he asked. "How much would it cost?" I asked in return, not having any funds for tuition, but intrigued by the idea of school. "It's free," he responded. "What do you study at this school?" I asked. "How to be a Jew," he answered. When I registered ambivalence, he said, "Why not come over for lunch and see for yourself?" Free school and free lunch. What could be bad, I thought. And so we exited the Western Wall Plaza, exited the old city, exited through the Damascus Gate, and walked the short way to Yeshivat Or Sameach, the light of happiness, situated on the edge of the well-known ultra-Orthodox neighborhood of Me'ah Sha'arim. I sat at a table with a group of young men, much like myself, out of college, most of them, American for the most part, all sporting kippot, who all spoke enthusiastically of the place. School, free room and board, and a bunch of English-speaking guys who loved it there. How could I refuse the offer? The 6 or so weeks I spent at Yeshivat Or Sameach changed my life. The yeshiva, of course, taught Judaism according to Orthodox principles. As we studied those principles, we also lived them from sunrise through 7 or 8 hours of classes until nighttime. The yeshiva's primary goal was to pull mostly young American Jewish men from their liberal Jewish backgrounds into the practice of orthodoxy, to make of them ba'alei tshuva, essentially returnees. Those days of living in a slightly overcrowded apartment remain powerfully with me many decades later, learning Bible, Mishnah, a bit of history, ethics, praying 3 times a day, observing kashrut and Shabbat. Obviously, I didn't choose orthodoxy as my path, but those weeks of learning from mostly American men sporting long black beards, wearing long black coats and wide-brimmed hats, pulled me out of my suburban ignorance and set me on a path that brought me, after more than a few decades, to this cold Nidre evening. I came to the doors of Yeshivat Or Sameach, a total Jewish ignoramus. That brief time opened me up to, well, it opened me up in embryonic form to essentially everything Jewish. Jewish history, Jewish thought, Jewish rituals, prayer, kashrut, Shabbat, Jewish music, Jewish art, Jewish fiction and poetry, Jewish demography, and above all, I opened like a door to the outside, to the Jewish people, our character, our history, our flaws. We have a couple flaws, our continually changing place in the world. I entered with little Jewish knowledge or Jewish passion and exited the yeshiva possessed with a Jewish obsession with Jews and Judaism that really hasn't subsided. The yeshiva experience transformed my world. And though I couldn't accept orthodoxy as a lifestyle, one critically important element of the life I experienced there never left me and never will. The Rebbe's at Yeshivat Or Sameach conveyed an endless passion for God, Torah, and Israel in a way I rarely encountered outside the Orthodox world. They believed, they really believed. They believed in an immanent God who gave the Torah and who has always guided the Jewish people throughout our wanderings. They pored over the holy texts day and night and saw in every word, in every jot and tittle, the presence of the Almighty in the world and in their lives. I encountered none of the ambivalence about Judaism that permeates much of the liberal Jewish world to which I belong, including among my rabbinic colleagues, and for that matter, my rabbinical school professors. We liberal Jews can express love for the Jewish people. Most of us celebrate Pesach, a Pesach Seder, but we have a difficult time praying. We can light the candles of Hanukkah and give each other presents, but we have a hard time admitting to belief in God. And if we admit to such belief, it's often accompanied by world-class equivocation. I've more than once seen the eyes of a room full of people glaze over and heads move up or down when I bring God into the conversation. I left the yeshiva and found myself on a genuine, compelling quest. The following summer found me in the basement of the library of Dickinson College, my alma mater, gobbling up its relatively modest Judaica library. I needed to know my place in the Jewish universe, while simultaneously seeking to understand the place of the Jewish people in the universe. Who in the world are we? I wanted to know. Who in the world am I? What is the meaning of God, Torah, and Israel? The big questions, life, the universe, and everything. The big questions brought me to rabbinical school more to receive the Jewish education my parents didn't give me than to acquire the title rabbi. It took me a long time, I have to say, well past rabbinical school, before that title settled upon me comfortably. And after rabbinical school, I went off to Brandeis University, which gave me a full scholarship so I could go for a doctorate in Jewish thought. Through those experiences, I had the privilege of sitting in classrooms and libraries, poring over ancient and modern texts in Hebrew, Aramaic, and German and English, in my desire to scour the ancient and modern minds to learn what our authors had to say about the big questions. I considered here summarizing, as I'm speaking somewhat autobiographically, much about marriage, family, my work, my rather odd rabbinic career, but then we'd be here until Ne'ilah, and I suspect a few of you would have a sufficient interest in my life to stay put that long. So for the longer version, I invite you to read the book I will someday write, hopefully in the not too distant future, working title, An Unexpected Rabbi. The thing is, the quest, at least my quest, never ends. It only morphs as I become older and immersed in more learning. Sure, I possess facts and ideas in abundance. Like every rabbi worth his or her salt, I can hold forth extemporaneously on a large gamut of topics for 10 minutes without much preparation, for a half an hour with just a little preparation, and for an hour after an evening of preparation, and longer if a PowerPoint presentation is required. But the search to pull everything together into a unified Jewish theory doesn't seem to be in my bailiwick. I read Martin Buber, for example, and I say, yeah, that view of God and the world makes sense to me. But then I pick up Mordechai Kaplan, someone whose views run counter to Buber's, and I say, that makes sense too. I read explanations of orthodoxy and I am drawn back into the yeshiva, saying to myself, yes, a God who's right next to me, that makes sense. But then I read an explanation of Reform Judaism and Conservative Judaism and Reconstructionist Judaism, and I say, that resonates too. Now, please don't think I'm some kind of wishy-washy character unable to come to a decision. You should see how quickly I buy a car, for example. I suspect it's rather more that there lie nuggets of truth embedded in most thoughtful writers' work, theologians included. Despite the plurality of beliefs that surround me, I believe nonetheless, I can ascertain some truths that have come my way over these last 50 years. These truths, capable of undergoing change, perhaps even tomorrow, come as the result of time, mental labor, and experience. And I'd like to share some of them with you this Kol Nidre evening, in the hope that some of what I have to say rings true to you too. 1, the Jewish people are enormously diverse. To catch one glimpse of that, all one needs do is walk the streets of a large Israeli city. Immigrants from more than 20 countries have produced a population possessed of a variety of hues and physical appearances. Here in America, though hardly in America alone, we've lately become aware of the presence of a large and growing population of Jews of color. Then there are the Jews to be found in several African nations, in India, in Central and South America. There may be only 15,500,000 of us, but we constitute a vast mixed multitude. We form a religious civilization. This notion, relatively new, was first articulated by Mordechai Kaplan in his 1934 seminal book, Judaism as a Civilization. We cannot be characterized by one or another set of relatively simple tropes. Bagels as the quintessential Jewish food? What about barakas? What about shakshuka? Well, this could go on. Judaism doesn't, I could go on citing all kinds of Jewish foods, some of which you may never have heard of. Judaism doesn't teach reincarnation? What about Gilgul HaNefesh, the recycling of the soul? This is barely the beginning. Jewish culture and ethnicity is vast, and it's all Jewish. 3, the Holocaust changed Jewish life forever. No other cataclysm in Jewish history compares to the Shoah in its horror and its depth. Every time I enter upon thoughts of planet Auschwitz, as it's been called, I'm baffled by its incomprehensible cruelty and what that cruelty teaches about humanity in general and the incredible potential of anti-Semitism to create destruction. But mainly, I mean here, the vast dislocation through the death of the 6 million. 4, the state of Israel, Medinat Israel, is an essential part of Jewish life all over the world. For perhaps as many as 50 years, this notion was axiomatic. Now, some folks want to separate Israel from diaspora life. My view holds that on May 15, 1948, when David Ben-Gurion declared the Jewish state's birth, and Jews re-entered history as a nation with all of the responsibilities that obtained thereunto, all of Jewish life, all over the world, inextricably altered. Much more must be said about this, but for now, I reassert that the critical nature of Israel to the Jewish people as an unalterable axiom. 5, God exists. I say this knowing eyes will now begin to glaze over and thoughts will wander to other matters. I hold that the God discussion can and ought to be endless, even if many doubters will at this point prefer to exit the train and pursue other Jewish matters. But on Kol Nidre in particular, I figure I have the right as a rabbi to assert the critical importance for God to be in the conversation, and what's more, to be in our lives. Without the eternal as an abiding part of our Jewish consciousness, everything else Jewish becomes trivial. How God gives Torah, how God brings the Messiah, how God can be said to be part of the creation of the world, what God means to me as an individual and as someone who is part of an ethnic and then human collective. All of these topics and so many more are grist for a much larger mill than a humble Kol Nidre sermon. Though I have to say that without my belief in God as a partner in the redemption of the world, for me, life's purpose diminishes. What is the reason for a synagogue? What is the reason to send our children to our religious school? What is the reason to pay dues to a synagogue or sit on a synagogue board, if not to pursue that partnership with the Almighty? Thus, I say the tendency to put God aside as irrelevant because of so many becauses, this propensity strikes me as an enormous error. God must always be in the Jewish conversation. 6, Judaism has something to say about almost everything in the world that's important. How to observe kashrut or Shabbat? Well, that's obvious. The rules for fasting on Yom Kippur or building a sukkah, naturally. But what Judaism teaches about ethics, about business, about politics, civil law, human relations, these Judaism teaches in abundance and with wisdom. Listening to what the tradition teaches is always enlightening. 7, Judaism and Jewish life take on greater and greater meaning the more one engages in Jewish matters. The more Jewish you do, whether lighting Shabbat candles or setting aside Shabbat in some special way, whether reading Jewish books on virtually any topic, or learning Jewish music, whether traveling to places around the world of Jewish interest, whether learning the depth of Jewish cuisine, or simply baking a challah, whether reading the Jewish news, whether volunteering in the synagogue or other Jewish institutions. Whatever one does to turn one's mind toward Jewish matters, these activities will compel you, compel me, compel all of us to further activity and help you become an even greater part of the Jewish world. So that's a part of my story and a part of its entailments. The tale of the Jew I became and the Jewishness and Judaism that compelled me to and propelled me into my day that I will embrace with greater passion, with great passion, until I can no longer do so. Amen.
Amen.
I ask you please to rise and turn to page 116.
Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמענו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל העולם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא.
And so, Adonai, our God, we look to you, hoping soon to behold the splendor of your power revealed, a world free of idolatry and false gods, a world growing more perfect through divine governance, a world in which all human beings make known your name, while those who do evil turn toward you.
ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו
thoughts turn to loved ones whom death has taken from us in recent days, and those who died at this season in years past. Our hearts open as well to the wider circles of loss in our community and wherever grief touches the human family. Zichronam livracha, may their memories be for a blessing in this new year and always. We're on page 122. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, Yalmad yibarach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayecho v'yomecho v'chayecho Beit Yisrael, v'agala u'bizman qarib v'meru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah v'barach v'yolam v'olamei maya. Yitvarach v'yitztabach v'yitpoar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei d'kudsha v'riku. Le'ela u'le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Ta'amiram ya'alama v'yimeru amen. Yehei shalom rabba min shamaya. V'chayim aleinu v'yalkol Yisrael v'yimeru amen. Oseh shalom v'bromav. V'yaseh shalom aleinu v'yalkol Yisrael v'yalkol yoshbei tevel v'yimeru amen. May the source of peace bestow peace on all who mourn, and may we be a source of comfort to all who are bereaved. Again, we say amen. Please be seated. And I invite our congregational president, Jana Lancaster, to come forward. We didn't discuss this beforehand. I hope, it looks like Tim is coming instead with some timely announcements.
Good evening. I know most of you, but for those who don't, I'm Tim Parshall, Vice President of the Board of Directors of Congregation Beth Shalom. And I'm extremely grateful for the weather that we've had. It's not terribly hot, a little bit of a breeze, could be a little nicer, but hey, take what we can get. And just a few days ago, the forecast was really pretty dicey, calling for some thunderstorms. So I think we should be very thankful for that. We need some rain, but the sky is beautiful tonight. So welcome all, whether you're here on Green Meadows Road, in your home, or perhaps in another location with family or friends. I'd like to express some gratitude to Jana Lancaster, whose remarks last week were so gracious and comprehensive that I really don't have to thank anybody else tonight, other than those who gave us wonderful renderings. Well, Nidre, Julie, Andy, Belland, thank you very much. And I'd also like to say thank you to the families of all of our volunteers who expressed great patience, I hope, for the time and energy that people have been putting into these services. But what I really want to talk about is something that both Jana and the rabbi have gotten to either directly or indirectly, and that's the concept of community. We still have founding members of this congregation among us. You can see their names on the charter in the sanctuary. Some of them are here tonight. Others of us came along a bit later. Some joined even more recently. If you, like me, have been around a while, you'll recall High Holy Day services at Danziger House, the Hillel Building, at First Baptist Church, and here on our property. But this property, which we purchased in the fall of 2002, came not long after I spoke the last time at a High Holy Day service. And that was in Rosh Hashanah 19 years ago. When I stepped up to the pulpit, I looked out at this gathering of over 200 people from our congregation, students from Hillel, other members of our community. And I took what I had prepared and shoved it in my jacket pocket because something was missing physically. My son, our son. It was the first time in his life that he was not present with us physically for High Holy Day services. And yet, while he was away at college as a first-year student, I gazed out upon this audience and felt a sense of togetherness. And that helped me spiritually reach out a few hours away to where Josh was and to connect with him emotionally, spiritually. And I like to think that that evening, even though it was we're a relatively small Jewish community, that we all could reach out just as we can tonight, even though there are only, 50, 60 of us here present on the Green Meadows property, that we're part of a much, much greater Jewish community. Here in Columbia, yes, but around the world. So even though he was missing, and I missed him dearly, I felt his presence. Because I knew he'd found a temporary Jewish home at his university's Hillel. And that he, like millions of Jews worldwide, was celebrating a new year, reciting the same prayers, all on the same day, albeit across the 24 time zones that encompass the world. And this evening, Josh and his family, 600 miles from here, even further away than he was in 2002, but they've got their own Jewish congregation there in Mississippi. And tomorrow, they'll hear the sound of the shofar at the same time that we hear it here. So even though we're only a small part of the broader Jewish world, yet we are a community unto ourselves. We support each other in times of need. We share moments of joy in our lives. We share moments such as this beautiful Kol Nidre service, and soon Sukkot, Simchat Torah. We are alive together. And that's something that we have to grasp. It's something we have to grab hold of and celebrate. And we are also the heirs of two Jewish communities that no longer exist because their communities dwindled and died out. We have two scrolls from the Sedalia Jewish communities. One scroll from Blytheville, Arkansas, Temple of Israel in Arkansas. The people from those communities live on with this community. And that's why it's important for each of us to do what we can to maintain this community, to help it to grow so that our children, our grandchildren, I got a 17-month-old grandson. He's going to be here tomorrow morning with his mom. Others of you have grandchildren. Others of you have young children yourselves. We need to commit to maintaining this community, to helping this community grow. So think about just what it took 19 years ago to come together to purchase the old Godfrey farm on which we now celebrate Yom Kippur. A couple of years later, to build a sanctuary after we converted the farmhouse into a more or less usable building. We've moved on from Danziger House. We've moved on from the First Baptist Church. And here we stand tonight. And with your commitment and with your continued service, we will continue to meet here, to gather here, to stand strong here for decades to come. So consider what you can do within this sacred community to contribute to that growth. Now, first step, come back tomorrow morning. Or Zoom in or YouTube in or whatever it is you have to do. Come back for the remaining services. Come back for a picnic on Saturday evening. Enjoy some pizza. But in the meantime, may you have an easy fast. Thank you.
Go ahead.
If it's been 19 years since you stood on a bima, I'd like to know what took you so long. That was very nice. That was very nice. I'm not sure we have at all, and if we have, not sufficiently enough, thanks Seth Rosen, who's been behind the, he's been behind the Zoom, all his services, making me look good, and Andy too, for that matter. And teaching me how to hook us up to Mivo or whatever the thing is called. So I just want to echo Tim's remarks. If those of you who are fasting have its own call, an easy fast. And we conclude with Adon Olam, page 126.
Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra le'et nasa b'chetzo kol azay melech shemo nikra be'acharei kiblot hakol levado yimlot nora v'hu haya v'hu hoveh v'hu yeh b'tifara v'hu echad ein sheni להמשיל לו להכבירה בלי ראשית בלי תכלית ולא העוז והמשרה והוא אלי בחי גואלי בצור חבלי בעת צרה והוא ניסי ומנוסי מנת כוסי ביום אקרא בידו עתי ברוכי ואיתי שnder מעירה ואם רוחי גביעתי אדוני לי ולא אירה.
שנה טובה מתוקה, צום קל, חתימה טובה. Hope to see you all tomorrow morning. Thank you all.
What time?
10 o'clock, right?